My name is Mike Chadwick. I'm with Ironside. I'm responsible for sales and business development at Ironside. The purpose of today's webinar is to really recap our impressions of the AWS reInvent 2023 conference in Las Vegas, late November. We're going to do it from a data analytics and AI perspective, but I would say that was really the focus for AWS as well. So it was great for us to see the things we do are extremely relevant to AWS and their customers. Here's going to be the participants. Thanks for retouching my photograph on the left. We're also going to have Tim Kratek, who's our founder and CEO. He's going to cover the BI aspect of the show and something he has a long history in and near and dear to his heart. Jeff Spear will handle the data engineering aspects of the conference, and then Brian Platt, who leads our data science and AI practice, will cover that aspect as well. So the agenda today will be to give a quick introduction to Ironside. I'm sure many of you know us, but I just want everyone to have the context of where we are, what we do, our focus on AWS. We'll cover that quickly. We'll do some overall key messages that we took away from the show. Then each of our practices will give their perspectives on the announcements, relevant aspects of this to our customer base, and each of the leaders will cover that. So as far as Ironside goes, we've been in business for about 25 years, always a focus on business analytics and data engineering. If you look historically, we helped hundreds of customers create their BI implementations, create the UI interface with the users to make sure it was extremely pleasant experience. In the modern world, we're helping customers migrate those BI implementations to the cloud, and in many cases to Amazon QuickSight because of the cost advantages of that. In the data engineering practice, our historical skill set was building data warehouses, making sure the quality of the data was accurate, the access to the data was easy. In the modern days, creating data lakes, data marts, moving data to the cloud, creating serverless data implementation. So a lot of that will be covered in today's webinar. On the data science side, this is our newest practice, but it really fit in beautifully to our capabilities because all of the things we do around the data engineering aspect of our customers' implementations are super required for implementing AI and ML. I think the thing I would like to note here is that there's so much hype around AI and ML, and many customers come to us saying, what should I be doing? How do I do it? There's a lot of confusion about what it can do for them. And one of our offerings is actually around use case discovery, prioritization. So helping customers understand what are good use cases for ML and AI. Can their data support it? Does the business case make sense? If so, how do we prioritize it? And I think this really helps in demystifying how they start in ML and AI without spending a lot of money before they understand that. We also have a very significant managed service practice. This historically has been around maintaining a variety of different BI legacy tooling, but it's also being leveraged as customers migrate to a cloud platform and reduce their costs. We also use this extensively on the implementations we do. So helping maintain and manage and improve existing implementations. A lot of customers really want that as a service, and it's been an extremely effective way for our customers to save money and yet get great maintenance of their technologies and implementations. On the data advisory side, I think this, like all of our practices, we have advisory capabilities. And I think like all of our practices, we're extremely practical at Ironside about making sure they make sense for our customers. So this can be all the way from helping an enterprise create a data roadmap to creating a data roadmap around a particular initiative to the extent that it makes business sense. So one size doesn't fit all, and I think we are able to advise on how to do that correctly. And I think data advisory is one of those areas that it's extremely critical to get right what you're supposed to do or what you can do within a given initiative. On the bottom right, you see a couple of logos from AWS. We're an advanced AWS partner, which is not easy to attain. That's over several years that you get that kind of level. So we're very proud of that. So here were some of the key messages that we took out of the conference. I love this quote from Dr. Swami, generative AI is fueling human intelligence and creativity. I think all of us have leveraged generative AI to help jumpstart some of our thoughts, aggregate content for us, structured in a way that's great to leverage, but it needs to be leveraged, and it needs to be leveraged in the context that we want it to. So getting that jump start's unbelievable, but being able to take your intelligence and your input and adjust that content to make sure it fits what you're trying to accomplish, I think is really relevant to where we are in the world these days. As far as the conference goes, it was amazing attendance. I think there were about double last year's attendance in person. Incredible excitement. There's always been incredible excitement, almost a little bit of chaos at AWS reInvent. But I thought the interesting thing here was historically it's always been very, very tech savvy, tech driven. There was definitely business tracks this year and business content that was relevant. I saw a lot more business executive and business technical executives attending, and I think that's an interesting point if you're looking whether you should go next year or not. It's not just a tech conference anymore. There was a lot of content around helping companies become data-driven organizations, and that was a theme throughout the conference. Simplifying the AWS modern data architecture, much like the architecture that they've always did, the well-architected framework that AWS has always advised. This is now focused on the data side of it, and I think they've made some great advancements there. We'll cover some of that in the practice areas. Generative AI, as I mentioned, was everywhere. People are excited about it. I think people don't know what to do with it, but they want to understand it, see what it how their organizations can take advantage of it. And there were a lot of themes around that. Generative BI was an interesting announcement at the conference. We knew in advance because we're dealing with some of the product teams there, but generative BI is the ability to, through that same kind of interactive approach as generative AI, be able to create business intelligence reports and then get the analysis of it actually written for you as a starting point. I think this is going to have some huge ramifications over the next months and years in terms of people being able to build really relevant reports that can affect their decision making as a company without engaging the tech team. So that was a really interesting announcement. Oh, so with that, I'll pass this over to Jeff Spear, who leads our data engineering practice.
Thanks, Mike. reInvent was just a ton of people, very exciting, lots of different things going on, very busy. Really sort of just the volume and traffic has increased tremendously in the last year. So before I talk about some of the details at reInvent, I wanted to quickly talk about Ironside's perspective on data and analytics. We call that the modern analytics framework. And it has a couple components that really make sense when you're working in the AWS environment. The most important thing is the left side of this diagram that divides the generation of insight from the automation of delivering data. And too often we see places where insights are done by spreadsheet, and the people who are very good at generating the insights create these amazing spreadsheets, and then they're stuck refreshing them. Often then they get more complicated, more manual, more time consuming. And that means they're not making more insights. They're just refreshing the ones they had a year or 2 years or 5 years ago. And so it's very important that as you recognize that value, to move it down to people who are good at automating it and presenting it and providing it in a way that lets the people who make insights do that. And in order to do that, in the middle, you have what we call data as a service. And that's a way of providing data at multiple levels of detail so that people can get the type of data they need as quickly as possible. And so the part on the right shows what that data as a service might look like. In the old days, everything was in the data warehouse. You spent a lot of time and effort doing that, and you got very, very nicely refined data that was very easy to produce insights on. And one of the challenges was that the warehouse was very hard to keep current because of that time and effort required to develop into it. So, IT would fall behind, and then other things would come up, and then you'd have people reporting in spreadsheets, and you would sort of be stuck. So more recently, the concept of a data lake has come up, and the data lake is sort of the opposite of the warehouse in that it's very easy to get data in because you just take the data more or less as is and put it in there. It's harder to get insight from it because nothing has been done to the data. It hasn't been cleansed, it hasn't been integrated. It's basically just raw data. And so a data lake is good because it guarantees that you've got all your data in one place, but you probably want to do something to it if you want to do analytics off of it. That something does not have to be all the way down to the bottom to a warehouse. You might want to have some sort of in-between state where you've done some amount of work to the data so you can get some amount of return from it. And in fact, our perspective on this is that the amount of time you put into refining data should match the value of that data, and that's going to change for different types of data. It's going to change as your business changes and data becomes more or less valuable. So we have the concept of these data zones where you might do some basic integration. You might take all your different ordering systems and put it in one table. You might do some basic data cleansing if you know you have issues with your sources, clear those up so that everyone running reports doesn't have to repeat that work, but do just enough to see the value that you want to see from it. And in order to make that possible over time, we have the concept of sandboxes, and that's the idea of you can sort of spin up temporary environments or create temporary data storage while you explore data and figure out where value is. So there might be data engineers or SQL engineers who can work with data, combine things, integrate things, discover value, and then when you prioritize that value, automate that and put it into an existing or a new data zone. And so understanding what data is valuable and how valuable it is and how much work you should put into it is an important component to sort of realizing value efficiently from your data, as opposed to sort of spending a whole ton of time putting everything in a warehouse, which there's just a lot of wasted effort relative to the value that you're getting out of it. So that's sort of our perspective overall as to where companies should be going in terms of their data and analytics. The cloud, AWS, is a great place to do this. It's got very good data lake technologies like S3 and lake formation. The cloud is great for spinning up sandboxes. You can, provision something, try it out, and then when you're done, you just shut it down, and there's no worry about, having to get hardware or sell hardware. It's all in the cloud until it can disappear as quickly as you need it to. So, with that in mind, we saw, a lot of things. We're going to talk about them in detail. But a lot of developments in QuickSight, Redshift, and of course AI, generative AI, on the insight generation side. In terms of data as a service, Data Zone, which I'll talk about, is AWS's new data catalog service, as well as some related items in Redshift. You'll notice that Redshift is showing up in all three of these categories, and that's because AWS is doing a lot of work to sort of make it the center of their analytic ecosystem. And they've made a lot of announcements this year in that direction. And then down in the value delivery side, Redshift, Zero ETL, serverless technologies, and again, generative AI, because that is showing up pretty much everywhere. So to move on to the data engineering side of things, we saw a few different themes this year. And so we sort of wanted to talk about each of those themes and then the announcements and other comments that pertain to that. So the first theme is really accessibility. And AWS is putting in a lot of work to create a unified platform where analytic users can connect and run reports and process data and do all sorts of things without having to go to the AWS console, without having to use the AWS Identity Manager IAM. And so it's a totally different experience, more like you would see with existing BI and data tools. And so this year they've made a bunch of announcements in that direction. They have integrated Redshift with their Identity Center, which is the way to connect to external authentication providers. So if you use Okta or Active Directory or another method of authentication, you can just use that same method for managing people in Redshift. You can also do it with QuickSight and other AWS services. And so again, you don't have to sort of re-provision everyone. People don't have to sign in again. It creates a more seamless experience to access these services. Related to that is Glue Data Catalog Views, which is in preview. The asterisk indicates that it's currently in preview. And this is something where they are using the Glue data catalogs, which are sort of views of different tables and data within the AWS ecosystem, and having those views be a single place where you can access that data from multiple services like Athena or Redshift or QuickSight, with one place to assign permissions to it. So you put permissions on this Glue data catalog, and then anything that accesses it uses those same permissions. So it's just a way to manage it in a more unified way. Redshift data shares are something that have become extremely popular, and we'll talk about that I want to talk about our perspective on this. But previously, Redshift data shares were read-only. You could take a Redshift cluster and let other Redshift clusters read from it. Now in preview, there's a way for them to write back as well. And then lastly is AWS's catalog tool, DataZone, which just went into general availability, I think this month, and also last month in November. And I'll talk about DataZone first. DataZone is a way for consumers and publishers of data to connect. So basically, if someone has a data source, say a Redshift database, they can publish that, and they can publish metadata about it. So here are the tables, and here's commentary on what data is in those tables, and you can tag different fields, you can tag different tables. It's a business data catalog, and you can publish that, and then other people can subscribe to it, and that gives them access at an AWS level to that data. So they can, if they subscribe to your data source, they can go into Athena sort of from that catalog. And again, this catalog is a portal. It's a platform outside the AWS console. So it's something intended for business users to use. And so right now it gives you access to like Redshift and Athena from within the catalog. In preview, they're giving you access to QuickSight and SageMaker directly from the catalog, from the DataZone catalog. So again, the idea is that you're in one place and you're doing all of this work. It's a great ecosystem that lets people, hypothetically, you could discover data, you could call up Redshift or Athena and sort of do some transformation and processing on it, and if you needed to sort of change what was there, and then you can call up SageMaker or QuickSight to do modeling or visualization and create the reports or outputs that you need. And so this is clearly a vision that they have. They made a lot of big steps this year in that direction. Of course, there's always more steps that they can do, but it's really come a long way in this year. DataZone was announced as public preview in 2022, so it's really come a long way since then. And related to that is this concept of a data mesh architecture, where we saw a lot of large Redshift users. They would have volume issues, they would have concurrency issues, and so what they can do with data shares is they can create multiple independent clusters, usually for different departments or organizations, and then share between them, so that if one group needs to see another group's data, they don't have to copy it. They can just use a data share and reference that other Redshift cluster directly. And so that architecture, that data mesh architecture, is really useful if you have multiple organizations that are creating and managing data and analytics on their own. It lets them work together as opposed to having to worry about centralizing in one place. And so being able to write back now makes that even more valuable, because if you have something that's extremely relevant to another group, you can update their data source directly. So that's what we've seen in terms of accessibility. At the lower right are the specific announcements, and so this is something that's definitely very exciting to us. So Zero ETL was the next theme. There was a lot of sessions on this. And the idea is that it lets you move data between services in near real time without writing code. And so they announced a bunch of these. Aurora to Redshift became generally available just before reInvent. So you can literally in Aurora click hit a switch, and the data that's in Aurora will go to Redshift in near real time as it's updated in Aurora. They announced public preview for RDS MySQL and Postgres going to Redshift, and DynamoDB, which is Amazon's NoSQL database, to go to Redshift. And they also announced S3 will go to their OpenSearch database. So this is really exciting. It's really good to be able to move data where it needs to be, usually to Redshift, without writing any code. And it makes sense that it's going to Redshift because, as I said before, Redshift is really sort of becoming the center of their analytic ecosystem. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that this really is more sort of zero EL, because this is moving the data. It's not really transforming the data. The way they make this work is because they have all the storage systems, internally underneath the covers, they can move the data more efficiently, sort of at the storage layer, without having to do it, within the systems directly. So that makes it much faster and more efficient. It does mean that it's tightly focused on AWS services. So if you have, data that's in all of these services, this is great. If you have data that's in other systems, then you may or may not be able to leverage this completely. So, real life scenarios, there may be some challenges. And also in real life scenarios, you often do have to transform the data, and that does mean you'll have to take some time, and you may have to have a batch process to do that. But even if that's the case, if you don't have to worry about the movement of the data, that's a big savings in time and complexity and efficiency. And the other thing I wanted to point out here is that Kinesis, which is the AWS system for handling streaming data, that already has integration to Redshift. So you can have streaming data coming in real time or near real time, say from internet devices or any other real-time source into Redshift, immediately already. Again, the specific announcements are down there. But this is a lot of zero ETL came up a lot, and I know they're going to be just adding to this. The idea is to make it as easy as possible to get data into Redshift or other databases, for analytics or searching or whatever else needs to be done. The next theme is AI and Q, AWS's term for AI. This is going to come up in a lot of different places. I'm going to talk about it, how it relates to data engineering. And this is, to some extent, providing access to large language models, but also how to use them in data engineering environments. So the first announcement, which is in preview, is Redshift can access large language models. So if you want to, use the output from a model in your Redshift code or in your Redshift tables, you now have the ability to do that. And they also announced that Redshift serverless, when it scales, it's using machine learning models to optimize how and when it scales. So you'll get more efficient and powerful scaling of Redshift serverless clusters. It also has, they've also announced the ability to have generative SQL. So when you're writing SQL in Redshift, you can leverage large language models to help you write your SQL, and either to write it for you and then you can check it, or to augment SQL that you're writing. And similarly, Q is integrated into the AWS console, so you can you basically have sort of a chatbot in the console where you can ask it questions and have it guide you to places. So if you can't remember where that screen was, or you're not sure what service to use, that helps you get to the right place. And then lastly, they're using machine learning for anomaly detection in Glue, so you can look for data quality issues based on AI and machine learning models. So some of this is, I want to leverage large language models and put it in my code, and there are definitely use cases for that. I can see, querying a large language model and asking it, what it thinks about this row of data. It might be able to detect data quality issues or write a summary or those kinds of things, and that could be useful in analytics. But I think a lot of this is really just use generative AI to augment developers and analysts writing code, writing SQL, and just make sure they write better code and faster code. One of the comments I heard was that someone went to write some code and they used one of these tools to sort of say, hey, this is what I'm going to write. Please give me a framework. And he said, I still have to write the code, but it does all the stuff that I should do, and sometimes maybe I don't because I'm in a hurry. So it means you get better structured code and more formal code, and that's good for testing and maintenance and sustainability. So I think as an augmentative tool for developers, this stuff is very valuable. Serverless is something where it's less about new announcements here. It's just more about the level of interest we saw. And serverless is the notion of having your code write and run in managed environments. So there are servers, there are things, but it's all behind the scenes. It's all managed by AWS. You don't have to worry about it. So you can run code and not worry about, what operating system is it running on, and did I upgrade the server, and all that stuff. AWS takes care of all that. All you do is sort of hand them the code and they execute it for you. So it's a very powerful and scalable method of development. They've made a few announcements this year. The scaling of Lambdas is now 12 times faster. So if your Lambda serverless code hits high scalability event, it will come up to speed much faster. As I talked about before, DynamoDB, which is very popular in serverless environments, now has zero ETL, so that data can go to Redshift. And that's particularly important because DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, which means it's really good at doing individual reads and writes, and it's very bad at doing bulk transfers. And so generally speaking, getting data out of DynamoDB is hard because that's not what it's designed to do. It's not designed to say, give me all of this data. So to have AWS behind the scenes moving that data to Redshift for you is very valuable. Elasticache, one of the caching databases effectively, now has a serverless mode. And this means that AWS is taking one of its popular databases and making it serverless, so you don't have to worry about all the settings. There's a whole bunch of things you have to worry about: how much read, how much write, how much memory. All of that stuff goes away when it becomes a managed service. So it means you can use Elasticache and not have to worry about that sort of thing. And then there were some improvements in step functions, which are very commonly used to orchestrate different steps in a serverless code execution. And SQS, which again can also be used to trigger things like Lambda, has a new sort of high performance mode where they can handle up to 70,000 transactions a second. So if you have very high volume events coming in, you can use SQS to manage them. So serverless is really good. We really like serverless at Ironside. It's getting a lot of focus in general. It lets you create code that scales, that's very easy to manage, and it lets you design in a very easy modular way. You can have lots of little small components that sort of call each other and spin up when needed. It is a little bit different to design and troubleshoot. And there were some really great sessions for developers and architects. So looking into things like Lambda observability, Lambda Power Tools, which is a library that AWS provides, that if you're writing Lambda code and not using Power Tools, you should go Google it right after this webinar, because it's tremendously useful. But also look up a few of these sessions, because there were just some really eye-opening things about how best to write code and how best to design these sorts of systems. And then lastly, continuous improvement. And this is mostly about Redshift, because again, Redshift is sort of the center of the universe for AWS data and analytics. And they're just tirelessly making improvements to it. And these are a couple of the improvements that we saw this year that are particularly important. Multi-dimensional layout, which is in preview, is a way of making queries more efficient that have multiple filters. So if you're filtering on a couple different dimensions, Redshift will now see that and will optimize how it pulls the data back and basically reduce the amount of time it takes to do things like table scans. So it's just going to make your code run faster when you're doing large analytic queries. You can now do cross-regional snapshots with Redshift, and you can deploy Redshift in multiple AZs at once. And so that is a way to basically make Redshift more resilient and just improve its sort of general uptime. And then lastly is support for Iceberg. And Iceberg is a very popular open file format, which a lot of different systems are using within and without AWS. And so having Redshift support it means that if you're using that open source file format, Redshift can read it along with lots of other tools. So those are the themes that we had in data engineering this year. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'm going to pass it back to Mike.
Thanks, Jeff. That was awesome. If anyone wants to get into the details of what this means to them, how they get started, I would encourage you guys to reach out. I think Dr. Swamy gave another great quote about a strong data foundation is critical to generative AI. Jeff touched on that, and I think that Brian will expand on that. So Brian Platt will present our data science practice.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the AI machine learning announcements. Obviously, the focus this year was on generative AI. That has been the hot topic for some months, and that's been a core, a lot of the discussion that's happening. So really, Amazon Bedrock is that cornerstone service. That came out in the last year or two, and that is the service that allows access to what are called the foundation models, the large language models, and the image generation models that underpin generative AI. And so Bedrock is really the service that is going to be that key piece. And so unsurprisingly, there was a lot of announcements around Bedrock enhancing the capabilities there, enhancing what it's integrated with was a big focus. I think a couple things to note that I think are interesting are that the foundation models, there's a bunch of selection tools because there are a lot of foundation models out there. Those that are familiar, Claude, Jurassic, Stable Diffusion. Amazon has Titan, which I'll talk a little bit about as well. So there's a lot of different options that folks have when developing solutions on what models to use. And Amazon's providing additional tools now to switch between those, to select the right one for your application. And I think that shows a real commitment to the fact that we've got a very evolving, rapidly evolving technology domain. And so Amazon supporting all these different models beyond simply their own in-house ones really is a commitment to that kind of innovation that's happening. The other thing that's happening with Bedrock is that it's getting integrated further into the AWS ecosystem. Jeff had mentioned step functions. That's one of the things that's now supported with Bedrock. So you can in your applications that use step functions, you can call Bedrock and the Bedrock services for generative AI parts of your application. So I think that as those additional kinds of things are integrated in for orchestration, whether that's agents, which sort of live within the generative AI space, or whether it's step functions, which are sort of general applicability to any AWS solution, you're going to see the ability to integrate generative AI into AWS solutions is going to get easier and easier. So I think that those are things to keep an eye on, and I anticipate that it's going to keep being that way. You're going to keep seeing improvements to Bedrock over the coming years. Knowledge bases is another announcement that came out, and this is actually, I think this is going to be a really transformative capability. So those that are familiar with the space, retrieval augmented generation is a framework for using generative AI that's evolved in the last, again, most of this, almost everything in the last few months, but RAG has come out. And what it allows someone using generative AI to do is use a trained AI model, one of the foundation models, one of the big LLMs that's out there, and incorporate their own data, their domain-specific data, their own private data in the query and then the response, which without having to do a complete retraining of the model. And that brings down the barriers a big way. Because there has been a lot of hesitancy around using some of these models that are out there. People don't want to put private data that gets scooped up into a model that anyone can use. And using RAG allows you to keep the model up to date with new information. It allows the model to keep to respond in context with your own documentation, your own information and documents. So what knowledge bases do is they actually provide a solution that solves all the big pieces of RAG. That you can point to your documents on S3, so you can have your pool of your own personal private documents on S3 that the knowledge bases are aware of. It will do the embedding. You can choose the model to do the embedding that provides essentially the context database that queries will be augmented with. And it has APIs for both retrieval of context as well as retrieve and augment, which allows you to pass the query in, get the associated context out of your own documents, and then augment the query with that to be ready to be sent to the LLM to formulate the full contextual response. And so the knowledge base capability within Bedrock covers all of those pieces, which had up to this point had to be built with a bunch of separate open source kind of pieces that had to be taped together to build a full solution. So having this all under one logo here is a really powerful capability. So I think that's going to make a really big difference to the adoption rates, which are already high of generative AI. Safety about generative AI is a topic that always comes up. The concerns about what are called hallucinations, the model coming up with something, and then concerns about some of the responses not being appropriate for a business application or for anything you want to expose to users. And so the fact that Amazon is releasing new services to manage the safety, manage the user experience, and to enable developers to do that kind of testing and make sure that the models they're using are giving responses that are appropriate and within their guidelines, is again a commitment to Amazon helping developers build generative AI solutions that are really in a professional setting and not just novelty applications. And so two of the big ones here are guardrails for Amazon Bedrock. as well as SageMaker Clarify, which allows you to work within SageMaker with an LLM or a foundation model to test various aspects of that model, including notably the toxicity and bias of the responses. If there's any concerns about the kind of responses it might give to a user, that can be clarified. That can be used Clarify up front to determine which model is the appropriate one to use and to minimize any risk of that. The Amazon Titan models, these are new foundation models. So Amazon Titan's actually been around for a little while, although it has not received as much attention as a lot of the other open source models that are out there or openly available models. And so the Titan text models have been available. There were some enhancements to them. So there's now a one that's designed largely around larger document contextual stuff, as well as one that's the Text Lite, which is more for conversational responses. But the two big announcements related to the Amazon Titan are the image generation. So Amazon has now finally released its own image generating foundation model, which I think everyone was anticipating and a long time coming. Well, not a long time, I mean a year, but a year is a long time in the generative AI world. But that it's no surprise that Amazon wanted to release one. Obviously, they wanted to get it ready to go, so that it was ready and competitive and compelling out there. So having image generation capability is now possible within the AWS ecosystem on native models for Amazon, as well as the multimodal embeddings, which allow you to take your own data that includes both text and numeric and graphical, image data, and embed that as contextual information. I mentioned previously with knowledge bases that the RAG framework allows you to bring your own documents to the table so that the generative AI that you use can use context from your own documents so that the responses it gives are also contextualized with your own documents. Multimodal embeddings allows you to do that with not just text documents, but with multimedia included into that. So that there's some new developments on the Amazon Titan. I don't think it's received as much attention as it probably should, and I think that it's something to pay attention to now. Having an Amazon supported model is really important. Having a diversity of models available to the community. I mentioned that this is an evolving space, so there's new models kind of developing and getting introduced into the scene all the time. So having more competition among those is good. It's healthy to have that kind of competition. And it is compelling to have one that is part of the Amazon ecosystem, that's natively built within Amazon, that has the support of a large established company like Amazon. That means you've got a model that's going to be around for a while, that's going to be trained well, that's going to be a stable, reliable thing to use in your applications. So Amazon Titan models are definitely something to pay attention to. It's a little bit of a sleeper announcement, but it's something to note that is now coming out and now available within Bedrock. So I think that's all on the generative AI. I know I'm moving fast for time, but we can certainly take questions and put things into the Q&A, and we will address them toward the end of the session.
So Brian, I feel like this is an area that a lot of customers see as a lot of hype, and they want to act on it. What's your perspective on the announcements, and how could they explore the first steps? Obviously we want them to call us, but forget us. What do you recommend?
So I think there's two things, and Jeff touched on the use of Amazon Q as part of the data analytics, and that is in fact using generative AI under the hood, if you will, to help developers make code, to write code, develop reports, and we'll talk a little bit more in the business analytics about how AI is helping develop that. So the easiest beginning steps of bringing AI into your organization is using it in reports that you already are using, and then having it be an assistant and kind of a co-pilot to help you develop stuff. The next one, which is the one I touched on, I would say, is the knowledge bases and the retrieval augmented generation, which is a framework which gets over the challenge of you do not need to retrain an entire LLM on your own. You can leave that to kind of the big guys like Amazon to do the training of the full LLM. But then the RAG framework allows you to bring your own data and your own documents, which is what, presumably you want to work with, right? You don't just want what the entire world is saying. You want what is relevant to your data, and you want to give responses that are relevant to your organization's data. And the RAG framework and the knowledge bases that Amazon's providing give a way to do that without requiring massive retraining or any modification to the LLMs themselves. You can use them as they are, sort of off the shelf, bring in your data, and then get responses, that are contextualized around your own data, your organization's own data. So I think knowledge bases is really going to bring those barriers to entry way down, and really is going to be an adoption point for a lot of organizations. So that's where I would recommend folks take a look if they want to start using customized LLMs within their organization.
So I think another great quote from the CEO of AWS was around the generative AI understands your business, and you need to make sure that it does. It's not magic. This stuff has to be contextualized. I think that's what Brian was talking about. And we're happy to have conversations because it's sometimes understanding how to approach the problem that's critical. And I think that's where our services can help. So keep that in mind. And with that, I'll pass it over to Tim Kratek, our CEO and founder.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Jeff and Brian, nice work kind of hitting the different highlights of data engineering and AI and data science. I'm going to take a couple minutes here, try to get through quickly to talk about some of the advances with AWS QuickSight. I think the thing to know is that this technology is rapidly maturing. I think the team who we work closely with is putting significant effort into sort of leapfrogging and moving forward. I think there have been about 150 different new features released in the last couple of years. I think the availability of display and customizations of analysis is growing. A new authoring experience has been deployed, which makes things easier. I think the thing that was mentioned at the outset around the conference, initially this was a builder conference, and this has grown into a builder and a IT leadership and business executive, right? So it becomes more of a transformational group effort to think about how to get to the cloud, and sort of how to leverage the technology, the ecosystem, and the advancing capabilities that we've talked about today. Authoring with fewer clicks, and then some improvements to the paginated reporting. When we think about this, the areas of investment from QuickSight are really grouped into 4 areas. One is sort of data democratization for business users, thinking about how to get more data more quickly into the hands of people that can make decisions. Again, reducing the technical complexity necessary to access and leverage this platform. Quicker, faster, and richer insights from an analytical perspective. Improvements from a governance perspective as it relates to how to integrate and how to manage these environments. And then lastly, APIs for everything. So as we think about this, it really kind of, from a visual perspective, most of the conversation at this point has been sort of hypothetical and is not something you can show. From a mapping perspective, new base maps, market clustering, global geocoding, heat maps, right? So there's just been improvements in how to visualize and how to deliver and architect and build solutions that answer the questions that are specific to your business. More capabilities, something as simple as a text box. Yes, that hello world there is something that a developer would understand the joke attached to it. But ultimately, just making it more flexible and easier to deliver solutions that get to how to visualize data in a way that makes sense in your business. So administration and integration. There's been a lot of effort put in from Amazon around the enterprise aspects of these solutions. There was significant work and significant capability in embedding and leveraging QuickSight to embed these capabilities into applications. There are really 2 ways to do embedding with QuickSight. One is sort of a one-click, where AWS manages much of the integration. The other one is to actually do it at, at the API level, which is a little bit more difficult, but it gives you more flexibility. I think that there is, again, significant improvements in integration with IAM and authentication providers like Okta and AWS's IAM. So architecting and understanding how you're going to deploy, how you're going to organize, how you're going to secure authentication, how you're going to secure object like reports or data sets, and then getting down to sort of row and column security of I can see these rows or I can see these columns, and managing that in a global way via some type of IAM, some type of Active Directory or LDAP, right? It just gives the enterprise capabilities of the tool more. It's just much easier to manage. Redshift has done a lot in this area. QuickSight can leverage and integrate with Redshift and understand sort of how you're managing data there. This concept of restricted folders is really interesting, where I can take data sets and reports, put them into a folder, secure that folder, and it really limits that access. So it just gives you many different ways. It supports the anonymous user, so the unauthenticated user coming in either from an application where they're authenticated. There are mechanisms to pass parameters in so that you can manage your security in a custom application. When you're talking about a typical internal enterprise BI environment, wouldn't necessarily recommend an anonymous embedding or an anonymous user. That's where you would use more of the integrated authentication that we've talked about to this point. Some significant improvements in the APIs from a DevOps perspective, doing things like moving content, assets as bundle from dev to QA to prod. We've written a number of things to sort of help manage, the typical SDLC requirements attached to that. Spice is a back-end capability to pre-aggregate data so we can have better performance. There's been improvements in the management of Spice as it relates to updating, optimizing. Spice is a piece of the AWS QuickSight ecosystem that has, you're getting a certain amount of Spice capacity out of the box. Anything above that either needs to be authorized because there is often a consumption charge attached to it, right? So the tool is becoming more mature as it relates to how to manage the use and deployment and allocation of Spice, and you have a lot more flexibility as it relates to that. The last piece is APIs for everything, right? So building, embedding, both from a DevOps and SDLC perspective, APIs for updating, APIs for embedding, just lots of work has been done there, and we're excited to see just the maturity happening around the product from an enterprise BI perspective, as well as additional pieces as it relates on the embedded application side. All right, so it wouldn't be a section if we talk about Gen AI. I think that Brian hit on some of the deeper and the advances from an LLM perspective. We're excited with this concept of Gen BI, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a minute. But this concept of Q, which I think both Jeff and Brian have spoken about, is really related to an NLP integration with an LLM underneath it, right? The interesting thing is this was released 2 or 3 years ago and has been learning all along the way. So in the past implementations within QuickSight have Q as an NLP interface. What we're seeing is that that has been advanced greatly, and because it's been in market for 2 or 3 years, it's matured significantly. So we're excited as they take the components of NLP and they move it into just making it easier for people to take advantage, right? We're seeing customers who have said, hey, we want to do a Gen AI prototype. We don't know where to start, as Mike mentioned. From our standpoint, we believe that this is an easy way to do that, right? Taking and leveraging Q, which integrates not only with sort of the foundational models from Amazon Bedrock, but also has context from all of your data, has context from the questions that you've asked of it in the past. It will learn over time, and really a neat way to start experimenting. We recommend, to start experimenting with Gen AI, soon if you haven't begun. We think it's a really powerful accelerator, both in terms of content as well as insight. We think it lowers the bar from a technology perspective for someone to access and sort of leverage the data that they have. So basically, leveraging AI to determine what's the right chart or graph, what's the best way to build calculations, the best way to refine visuals. There's a lot of capability around just making it easier, right, for someone to author an analysis in the context of this. So really great progress there. AI answers to questions of data, right? So essentially, the QNLP model can look at dashboards, provide summaries, lots of Q&A for non-experts. Again, you're leveraging Q on existing analyses to better interact, to better understand what someone should get from a dashboard. So really just advanced features coming out of the box in how a reader might interface with analyses you provide them, right? So really great work. And again, Gen AI was not developed 2 months ago or 3 months ago when OpenAI released ChatGPT. This has been out there for a number of years and has been learning and becoming stronger. And has also been learning, if you have these tools deployed in your environment, it's been learning on your data. So this is really one of the areas where I think we've seen probably the most advanced features, right? So many folks leverage their BI tools to create analyses by running a report or retrieving a graph, taking that graph using Snagit or Screenshot, putting it into a PowerPoint, providing additional context, and then sending it up to management. One of the things the stories within QuickSight will do is allow you to, one, use generative AI to pick and choose the different elements, graphs, charts. You'll see the input there, build a story about marketing campaign performance over time, top campaigns, and account managers, and how can we improve overall campaign success. So essentially, the tool will provide the dashboards, and then additionally will provide the narrative and the content, right? And it will do that inside of the environment, right? This is not taking it out and putting it into QuickSight into PowerPoint where it's not connected to the database. It's time consuming, it's not repeatable, it's manual intensive, right? So our goal is to provide analysts with a further matured story where they can then add any additional content, remove any hallucinations that have come from it, and really provide this as an easy way for analysts to deliver insights as well as commentary created by Q and leveraging generative AI, to tell a story about what's happening in the business. So again, happy to talk further about this. So just some high-level highlights: Q, Spice ingestion, new analysis authoring environment, and then the Spice capacity auto purchase. So these are 4 of the specific releases, and there are links in here. At a really high level, we're just excited about the continued maturity of the platform, the integration and leveraging of the AI and Gen AI backgrounds. There's also some additional integration with SageMaker Canvas, embedded into QuickSight that we're interested to learn more about. The bottom line is the intention and the capability of the tool is growing every day, every week, every month, and we're excited about that. And these are just some of our takeaways from what we learned out in Las Vegas.
Thanks, Tim. I know we're almost at the end here. maybe I'll ask you a quick question and then we'll save the questions that were put into the chat and we'll send those out with the recording. But I know we've done a ton of BI implementations. Generative BI is, I think, a different thought process for a lot of our customers. What are your thoughts on helping our customers maybe explore that next step?
Yeah, I think there's a whole variety of ways to do that. Immersion days where you can play with the capabilities and connect the capabilities into the data sets that you have. We believe that Gen AI and just having the technology help an author to have a starting point for analysis or a dashboard or a report, and then provide the additional context that comes out of Q. You know, it just makes it so much easier to get started, right? And you know, I remember as a BI developer many years ago, everything started with a blank canvas, just kind of like when you open up Word, you have a blank sheet there, and you got to kind of figure out where you want to start. The benefit of Gen BI is that you'll get a 60, 70, 80%, you know, head start on what you're trying to do just by asking a simple question. And you know, that gets stronger and smarter over time because it's learning from how you interface with it, what you change, how you build those analyses, right? So it's really just I implore people to, you know, just start, and we're happy to get engaged and help you. And we're happy to think about an immersion day, a whole variety of ways to engage.